Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our Stand Up Australia listeners and my Empowered Substack listeners. And I am so thrilled. I am beyond excited to be once again speaking to the amazing Kathleen Kauth. So, how are you, Kathleen?
I'm doing great, Robin. So good to see you again.
Likewise. I've been so looking forward to our follow-up chat, and a few things happened that caused me to have to delay it, that's okay. We're here today,
What?
and as I mentioned to you before I hit the record button, I have this enormous list of topics to talk about with you today. So I'm probably not even going to get through half of it, but that's okay. Hopefully
I'll keep coming back.
you'll be back for round three. I love it. So first up, there has been a little kind of flurry of trying to bring COVID back to life, apparently, in the US. So
Yeah.
tell me how that's looking from the middle of the US, where you are in Nebraska.
From the middle of the US, we have a few more panicky people who are like, oh, it's going to come back. And my message to everyone has been do not comply. Absolutely not. Just say no. If they try to tell you to wear a mask, say no. Get arrested if you need to be. They can't arrest everyone.
Mm.
I've also, now that I'm a state senator, I've been sending letters to our the federal delegations, their Health and Human Services Committee, the transportation committees to say, this is a violation of our freedoms. Don't do it again. And I know all of these experts who can give you information about masks, how air particles move. Stephen Petty is an amazingly talented man. And what he knows about how air moves, and he actually trains hospitals how to use their masks properly. And he's
Mm.
always maintained that this is just nonsense that they think a mask will actually work on viruses. So I've been notifying, our legislators who go to DC, our two senators and our three congressmen, let them know what's going on personally, and then sending letters out to the rest of DC and saying, no, not going to happen. So, and I'm very
Not going to
confident
happen.
it's not happen here.
It is super reassuring that both the Kaiser Permanente mask mandate and then it was Lionsgate, wasn't it? The film studio.
One day.
Like the pushback was so fast and so strong that
And it
they
needs to be, and people can't
okay.
forget. Yeah.
Yeah.
People cannot forget how badly they manipulated the data, how badly they used propaganda to scare people into doing something that has absolutely no medical merit whatsoever. So we have
It's
to
yeah.
push.
It's astonishing, isn't it? I mean, after the Cochrane review, the updated Cochrane review, just completely put the kibosh on all of this,
Yeah.
and still they try to resurrect it. I did see there was a little clip of Saint Anthony Fauci on, I think it was MSLSG. I'm not sure where I got that from. There's some podcaster who calls them that, and it really stuck with me.
I really like that name, though. That's great.
Well, they're on something. I think it was them. I can't quite remember, but the presenter actually gave Saint Anthony a bit of a grilling and said, "Well, what about this Cochrane thing?"
And he
And
denies it. He says there's more studies out there. Not true.
yeah, as a matter of fact, that's Cochrane's job, right? To look at
Right.
all the studies and then to classify them. This is a high quality study. We
Right.
can use this in evidence. This is an absolutely garbage study, which of
Right.
course is what the CDC was churning out and then spruiking for the benefits of mask. This is a garbage study, so it didn't even make it into our analysis for these reasons. And anyway, so I'm so pleased to see that Tom Jefferson has basically come out and said, no, it's garbage. Fauci is relying on low quality studies, and oh wow, it's
And
really
we're starting to see, the like Jay Bhattacharya, Peter McCullough, the doctors who've been pushing back on this, Simone Gold, they're starting to get traction. And now you're starting to see more doctors who are willing to stand up with them and to push back. There's a little bit of the switching of the jerseys going on, and people are like, well, I never believed that. Well, yeah, but you wanted to make me put something on when I walked into your doctor's office, which is why I stopped going to the doctor. It's people don't
Or,
want to be
or
the
how about I go through your social media posts from, a couple
right.
of years ago where you were ranting and raving about all these
Exactly.
people who refuse to wear masks. So yeah.
Exactly.
That's a whole interesting topic. And you know what? Look, let's go there. So there's a variety of approaches that I've heard suggested for, how do we handle these jersey switches? And there is a faction of the loosely described freedom movement who say, no, you're not welcome. You weren't with us from the start, and so we don't trust you. You're controlled opposition. If you didn't have the right philosophical framework from the beginning, then how can we trust you not to switch jerseys again when the going gets tough? And then there's another faction that says, look, we need all the help we can get. We need more people on our team. Let them come in. As someone with a background in mediation, what's your take on this?
First of all, if I understand the reasoning behind saying, nope, you are clearly over there, have painted yourself as the enemy. And I understand the people who want to come back and not be the enemy. There's an old saying, Mark Twain, I believe, said, it's easier to fool people than to convince them that they have been fooled. So people have dug down deep and they've doubled down. Yep. And if they're starting to come around, I do think we need to say, okay, acknowledge that you were wrong. Because you cannot be fooled again if you can say, this was done, I bought it, and I'm a fool for buying it. But once you make that acknowledgement, once you say, I was had, then you can start being angry, but then you know what to look for. If you don't go through that self-process of acknowledging that you were wrong and that you were misled, or that you wanted so badly to believe, for whatever reason it is, if you don't go through that process, you're going to be misled again easily. So I do think that there should be a good deal of skepticism. Welcome people back in, but you don't necessarily have to trust them. And it's okay to point out, you told me that it would be better off if I died because I didn't want to get the shot. You told me that I was killing people by not putting a mask on. Those are things that cause harm to other people. So I think there needs to be a process of acknowledgement. And then, yes, we do need other people to stand up and say, not again. But the second they wobble, and you're going to see lots of people who right away go right back to it because they believe that they're saving people. I mean, it's that self-martyring kind of, and I think it's people who just don't have enough real struggles in their life that they need to feel like this is a struggle.
Yes, this is a Jordan Peterson often talks about, and I can't think of the exact phrase, but it's kind of like cheap moral virtue. This is something that you can sign up to or sign on to. It's a set of behaviors that aren't terribly
virtue signaling.
Yeah, virtue signaling. It's not terribly costly for you to do it. It's kind of like no skin off your back. Although I would argue that wearing a mask all day is actually quite costly if you
quite costly, yeah. Or injecting yourself with the shots, or whatever.
Yeah. But so you don't have to undergo any great travails to do this, though. There's no deep soul searching. There's
no impact.
Yeah. And so, wow. So the holding to account bit, again, I mean, if let's bring this down to an example that I think many people who are tuning in are going to have happening in their lives. What about in a family situation where someone's been excluded, they weren't invited to a wedding, or they couldn't attend a funeral, they were excluded at Christmas time or Thanksgiving. Not that we had that here, but yes, anyway.
Right. But there were huge family problems with that when people were told, if you don't get the shot, you can't come.
Yep.
I still have a sister who doesn't like leaving her house. She, is very insistent on everyone being part of, she refuses to contribute to a global pandemic. I'm like, I just wanted to stop by for, lunch because I'm in town. And it's really, I think we need to say, okay, it was hurtful when you did that. And some people are never going to be ready to hear that because they really are emotionally scarred and so deeply bought into it. They may never come out. And they may never say, they'll look back on it and say, I helped save people because I was willing to do this. And that's probably the path that they will go down next. Is you weren't willing to do the hard stuff and I did. So the fact that we're out of the pandemic is not attributable to you, it's attributable to me.
Yes,
That's
me wearing a mask and getting my 7th booster and all of this. Yeah.
And that's a self-defense mechanism. But if you are speaking with your family members, you should be able to say, it really hurt me when you excluded me because of this, and then have simple data to back it up. Say, look at the Cochrane study, look at these studies. Jay Bhattacharya has some great stuff out there. So does Peter McCullough. There's so much out there now. It's really hard to not find it, but give them a few easy to understand, simple pieces.
Yeah.
And say, this is the stuff that I've known about for more than 3 years. Yep. The fact that the CDC has just released data saying that people who have gotten the vaccines are more likely to get COVID.
No kidding, right? Again, this is the frustrating thing, right? Because so many of us were early on. We were passing around those videos that showed
and you should be skeptics.
Yeah,
you should be skeptical of rapid fire, brand new technology and injecting it into your body. That's just
common sense.
Right.
Yeah. Common sense until about 3.5 years ago. I think, many people that I know have been guilty of fire hosing, right? So sort of bombarding people with, this article and this study and this.
And it's too much, and you can't do it. You can't deal with it. It's overwhelming, and that shuts people down really, really fast.
So I love this idea of just have a few kind of set pieces. Here's the Cochrane collaboration, and here's what he's not really the lead, but he's like the chief spokesman for that. Actually,
or Stephen Petty's podcast, or something that's easily digestible, and you always say, "I can get you more if you want to know more."
Yes. But
don't. They can go to you and say, "Robert."
Don't bombard them with stuff. Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
That's an emotional response from people who have been studying this for years and years and who have been fighting for 3 years plus to want to say, I know all of this. And it is very frustrating when you see the articles coming out and, oh gosh, it might not be great for us to be doing this to children. And it's like, I know. So
yeah. No kidding.
There's frustration. You've got to be able to temper it if you want people to hear you.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. Terrific advice. Now, again, choosing something from my topic list that
you need to just have a checklist that you just go down. We'll just mark them off.
So has there been, I think we can probably discuss this fairly briefly. So the bill that we discussed in detail during our first conversation, or our first in this series anyway, has there been any progress to this? I mean, the bill, so this is the Let Them Grow bill, the one that specifically, well, actually, do you want to quickly summarize it? And then tell me if there's been any development, any challenge to this?
So LB 574, the Let Them Grow bill, was originally designed to ban surgeries, cross-sex hormones, and puberty blockers in children under age 19. 19 is our age of majority in this state. We wound up getting surgeries banned, and we have directed our chief medical officer to come up with rules and regulations based on evidence from around the world. So he's right now sorting through all the evidence. I've heard that he's having difficulty finding any evidence, because there's not any, saying that any kind of medical treatment treats gender dysphoria. It doesn't. It's a mental illness. So we're trying to put guidelines in to make it very, very restrictive. We were also able to add a pro-life portion onto that bill. And because the groups that fight very hard against life and against keeping children safe, they sued. And the original lawsuit was because we had they said we have 2 things in our bill, and we have what's known as a single subject bill. However, the judge ruled that they are both related to public health issues, and we have a very broad latitude. And the title of the bill, Let Them Grow, clearly applies to letting children grow and letting babies develop. Yeah. So gotcha. we won the first one. They are now the ACLU, which is the American Civil Liberties Union, which to me is a very far leftist organization. But they filed another lawsuit. So It's just a process of lawsuits and appeals, lawsuits and appeals. If it gets up to the Supreme Court, great, we'll have that kind of a decision. There are over 20 states in this country now who have enacted these types of bills. Yeah. My next bill is sports and spaces, which says biological males do not compete against females, and boys and girls do not share each other's locker rooms and bathrooms, K through 12.
Again, something that we kind of all knew was the right thing to do
right.
for both males and females until yesterday.
Exactly.
Do you know, I recently found out, sorry, this is, it's on topic, but my kids are now 18 and 22, so we don't have to navigate the high school system or the school system at all anymore. I recently found out from a local tradesman in the area that there's a very large, because we're in a rural area, and so there's the nearest kind of large-ish town has a, by Australian standards, a very large high school. I think it's about 1,600 students, because it draws kids from this entire rural area. Anyway, it's the one high school in this, again, very conservative rural area that has basically unisex bathrooms. I was really, really shocked. And this is not going down well with the local community.
No.
The guy the guy that we learned this from is actually pulling his kid out of this school. So yeah, because from my perspective here in Australia, there's a saying, you probably heard it, only in America, right? And so what we hear is something that's just absolutely bonkers. We kind of roll our eyes and go, oh, only in America, right? But it's here. It's already here in a little town of like 25,000 people.
And it's been being infiltrated slowly and across institutions. And when it's dripped out bit by bit by bit, people think, oh, well, that's not such a big deal. And so the weaponized compassion, we talked about that before. When people's compassion is weaponized against them to make them feel bad for not going along with something that is clearly bonkers. It's like, why would you want to hurt that poor kid's feelings? Well, what about all the other kids whose feelings are going to be hurt or affected in some way?
And in any case, do you really think that kid whose feelings are being hurt, do you really think that, affirming them as being that which they are not is helpful to them? Of course, it is. You don't affirm the delusion of someone who who thinks that aliens just landed from space and conveyed a really important message to them. I mean, you don't. That's a person who needs help. They need compassion. They need someone to listen to them. Something's going on in their life,
and it's not caring to lie. It is not caring to lie to people, especially kids, and say, "I know you feel desperately unhappy in which, first of all, puberty. Who didn't feel desperately unhappy? Kids with gender dysphoria, it's much more intense, and they do need psychological help. But they need psychological help because it's a psychological problem.
Yes.
And the
wrong body. That's not a thing. No. So sorry, I distracted off track. Okay, so we the first bill, which was sorry, can I just ask, while the complete lack of evidence is being reviewed, is there a moratorium on the prescription of these substances?
So starting October 1st, the rules and regulations have to be in. We had to get it so that people who've already started them are grandfathered in, which I didn't like. I don't like any adjustments to it. Here's what I've learned is I should have made the bill absolutely crazy rather than what I thought was reasonable and rational.
Because then you could ratchet it back to sanity.
Exactly. And there are some states who started off with wanting to criminalize the parents and put them in jail for 10 years and criminalize, the doctors and put them, like very, very extreme, but they were able to back things down. So note to myself is, and I said that actually in a press conference and people like, oh my.
Well, watch out next time.
Exactly.
Oh my goodness. All right.
That's year one.
Yeah. Watch me now. Okay, so the second bill, which is on the
sports and spaces,
keeping boys and girls sports separate and their locker rooms and change rooms separate. Yeah, so that's
That will be started. So we'll start that in January. That's my priority bill. So every year we get one priority bill. That one will be mine again. And so Let Them Grow was my priority this last time. And the reason I chose Let Them Grow, Sports and Spaces had much more support. I had enough votes to just do it, but the Let Them Grow was more important because of physically harming children. Irreversible experimental drugs and surgeries were being done. And that's also, the ability to give someone puberty blockers feeds into the Sports and Spaces, because what people are saying is, well, of course this boy should be able to compete on this girl's team. They've been on puberty blockers or cross-sex hormones since they were, and the ages were getting younger and younger and younger so that they could play sports. So we needed to stop the damaging of the bodies first.
Yep.
And
yes,
then
understand. So that's where you threw your
right.
efforts and priority.
Right.
Got it. Okay. Back to the ACLU. Now, I know a little bit about the history of this organization, and it seems that in the past they were truly a free speech organization. I mean, one of their most famous acts was kind of backing a neo-Nazi party's right to parade through a town, Skokie, Illinois, if I remember rightly.
Yes, Skokie.
Which had, sorry, you correct my pronunciation, which had a high proportion of Jewish people, including Holocaust survivors. So parading through the town, singing Nazi slogans and like really,
because it's free speech.
Yeah, the vast majority of people would say that's really reprehensible. But the ACLU said, you know what? It's free speech. We back them.
Exactly. They've also, burning an American flag is allowed because it's an issue of free speech. However, they will come after you if you burn a gay pride flag.
A pride flag, yeah. Okay.
So, or a Black Lives Matter flag. Yep. So those things all of a sudden are sacrosanct. You can't touch those, which that's not acceptable. If you have a rule for one, it must be for all. So the ACLU has gotten very, very woke. They're very big into the equity.
Do you know what has happened? What has happened to ACLU? I'm presuming it's where the donor funding is flowing from. Yes. But do you have insight into that?
I don't really. I just know that they're I don't like it when they get used as leverage. So I've had our school board association lobbyists told me, well, the school boards don't really want to try to implement this on their own, and we're not backing it because the ACLU has let us know that they are actively seeking a plaintiff. They're looking for a kid who identifies as trans to sue a school board. Mm-hmm. So I said, well, I have an attorney firm who's ready to take on any case of any kid who doesn't like the fact that they are competing against the opposite gender and who doesn't want the opposite gender in their locker rooms and bathrooms. And he was like, oh, but we've got to nullify this threat of a lawsuit. Threatening a lawsuit should not be how you have change extorted. And that's what's happening. So if it truly, I am all for going through the judicial system if they truly believe they have a case, but they don't.
Yeah. Okay. So that's really quite disturbing about the ACLU. I noticed also that they just completely, I was going to say something rude. They were not there for people who were being discriminated against when it came to, for example, compulsory, experimental injections to keep your job or stay.
Absolutely not. They were full in on the mask and on the mandates, and they vanished as far as standing up. So their willingness to stand up appears to be directed at things that their donors think are important, and it's not a lot of the things that I think are important.
So once again, it's follow the money. Where are those donations coming from? And which I suppose that's a neat little segue. So I sent you an article. I'm not sure if you had time to read it, but it's called "Who Are the Rich White Men Institutionalizing Transgender Ideology?" Did you
read it yet? No.
Ah, righto. Okay, that's fine. It is absolutely fascinating. And let me just I'm just going to pull it up. In fact, why don't I get fancy and share my screen? Okay.
There we go.
Yeah. Oh, getting technical here. Okay, so here we go. It is really, really super interesting. So the author, who is Jennifer Bilek, I hope I'm not mispronouncing her name. I've seen a couple of interviews with her. She is one.
She does a good job.
Yeah. So this is all about, you know, where the money is flowing from, and it's really interesting. So long story short, she was, as she says here, an environmental activist who was deplatformed from a speaking venue by trans activists. So she started digging into, you know, where is the money coming from, and so who is funding the transgender movement? Exceedingly rich white men with enormous cultural influence are funding the transgender lobby and various transgender organizations. So the Pritzker family are major players in this. George Soros, you actually mentioned in our first talk. Martin Rothblatt. Have you heard of this character at all?
I've heard. I haven't. Now, Jennifer Pritzker, I've seen. Jennifer Pritzker is the son of the Illinois governor.
Yes. There's a whole section in this on the Pritzker family who were there. They made their money in it's Hyatt, isn't it? The Hyatt hotel chain. Yeah. There we go. Hyatt hotels. And nursing homes. I've forgotten that bit. Yeah. So Jennifer Pritzker, who was formerly a man in the military and is now, you know,
Jennifer is still a man. Jennifer just likes to look different.
Yeah. Okay.
You don't change your sex.
Absolutely, fundamentally correct. Let me just underline that. You know, you are born absent rare chromosomal disorders. You know, you are either born with 2 X chromosomes or XY. Every cell in your body actually does have these X chromosomes. They don't just determine your gametes. Yes, you don't get to change from a boy to a girl or the other way around. You can dress as one. You could even have your genitals rearranged, and you can have the hormones that the opposite sex has. Doesn't make you the opposite sex. So yes. Let's see. This Martin Rothblatt character, who, like Jennifer Pritzker, is actually a man, and so
the transhumanist part is the part that scares me about him.
That's it. This is born as Martin Rothblatt, and then somewhere in middle age had the surgery to rearrange his genitals so that he can present as a female while not actually being one. But he wrote this book called From Transgender to Transhuman, a Manifesto. And it's a real disturbing read. And essentially, I guess Martin discovered, after having this incredibly invasive, intrusive surgery, that it didn't solve his problems, and he was still kind of, not real happy with who he was. And so he figured the next step is transhumanism.
Because it worked so well the first time.
Absolutely. Yes. Unbelievable. So there is a lot of this transhumanist element in the transgender movement, and it really is, look, just total denial of nature. So we don't just get to deny that we're either male or female. We get to deny that we're even biological creatures, because we can have various add-ons. And this is where I find the Elon Musk connection really disturbing, because he is very much in favor of transhumanism and the
which is interesting, considering he has a son who is now trans, and he's very disturbed by the fact that he feels he lost his child to this movement. But yet he is continuing. I mean, his neural link, the implants that he's developing, again, all of those things may have great applications, but the flip side is there will be dark ways that they are used.
100%. So one of the very interesting things that that caught my eye is how the funding is actually channeled through anonymous funding organizations such as Tides Foundation. And I was doing a little check into various funding organizations a while ago, and I came across this Tides Foundation. That's a most interesting organization. Do you know much about the Tides Foundation?
I haven't heard anything about that one.
It's essentially a pass-through. I mean, basically any kind of woke organization that wants to get funding, but where the donors don't necessarily want to be identified with funding these, in my opinion, whack job ideologies, they can channel it through the Tides Foundation. So the Tides Foundation acts as kind of like an anonymous pass-through. So
Well,
in
it's
legal,
essentially money laundering.
yeah, legal firewall and tax shelter for foundations and funds political campaigns, often using legally dubious tactics. So yeah, this is a really, really interesting article. I will put in the show notes for our discussion. And I would definitely say, you know, if you want to learn more
And the
about
federal.
yeah, yes, it's been cross-posted on a number of different platforms, but I'll put a link to it in our show notes. So
And
there's
I just link to you. There's a group called Gays Against Groomers, because as you saw from that article, the LBG now has to include the T. So they got kind of hooked on the money and supporting their organizations. And now all of a sudden there's this push to say, well, this T is more important and we're giving more money. And as long as you do what we say and make the T your priority and support that, then you'll keep getting the money. So there's a group, Gays Against Groomers, who are saying, wait a second, this is not acceptable. This group has actually teamed up with Moms for Liberty, which is a very, very powerful group of parents across the country. They have chapters everywhere, sprang up in the last 2 years because of the COVID crisis. And they're saying, look, you're pushing these things. And for these two groups, which are radically different groups, to come together for common cause to say our kids are being targeted. Yeah. I think people should pay attention to that, because when you see strange bedfellows,
strange bedfellows indeed. Yeah.
There's a reason.
That actually reminds me of a group that was founded in the UK called the LGB Alliance, and that was founded by a couple of lesbian women who were really bothered by the fact that men who wanted to present as women were trying to get access into women-only spaces, including lesbian dating apps. So, you know, if you're
being shamed because if you don't accept that this man is a woman, then you are homophobic, transphobic, you're every phobic. Please, people, someone calls you phobic, it's their problem, not yours.
Yes, indeed. It is a ridiculous slur that just it's basically a red flag telling you this person has some very, very poorly thought through ideas.
And they've lost the argument, and so now they're calling names.
Yeah, exactly. So let's see. So in terms of the legislation, there are lawsuits against it. And so what strikes me is that you know, first rule of journalism is follow the money. Okay, so obviously if someone files a lawsuit, there has to be money behind that. So I'm assuming that these, you know, these same organizations, the likes of Soros and of course the Buffetts, who
and we're in Omaha. This is the home of Warren Buffett and his daughter.
Warren Buffett. Yeah. So you're up against this enormous amount of money, and then you have to defend it with money from the public purse. So this is actually
which that's the leverage that people are saying. You know, the liberal senators on the floor are saying, we're gonna why are you gonna force taxpayer dollars to spend it? And you know, this is the guilt trip and the shaming, and that you are not, you know, a financially conservative person because you would rather spend money. Like, our children are worth the fight. That is the only answer anyone needs to hear. Our children are worth the fight. There is no dollar amount that equals our children being mutilated and having these drugs. Now, and I will tell you, Planned Parenthood is a huge supporter of this movement. Do you know why?
No kidding.
They're now selling and prescribing the puberty blockers and the cross-sex hormones. You can walk in, use a model called informed consent, which basically means they give you a list of all this stuff that could go wrong, have you check it off, and you walk out with a prescription if your parent is with you. There's no counseling. There's no nothing.
No medical assessment. No
medical assessment whatsoever, other than a child coming in and saying, this is how I feel. And a parent who will come in and say, I agree. And you only need one parent. So what's happening is, in divorce situations, you have one parent leveraging. You've seen in California, you can get your child taken away from you if you do not fully affirm whatever that child believes. So, you know, as you take that further, have you heard about transableism? Do you know what that is?
God. All right.
Horrific.
Hit me.
People who believe that they were meant to be disabled in some way.
Yes, I have heard of this. This is
blinded. Yes. And they're
Yes.
finding doctors who will
Take
do
off
this.
my limb, take off my perfectly functioning arm because I
Exactly.
believe that I should have been born without one.
Sever my spinal cord so I cannot walk, so I will always be in a wheelchair.
And there are doctors willing to do this,
Yes, there are.
to
And they're
harm.
doing it. They're doing it under the guise of it's human rights because this is how they feel they're truly meant to be. Now, you look at it, anorexic. I'm sorry, but any doctor who says to an anorexic, "You're right, let's put you on diet pills and do some liposuction," they should be arrested because
Yes.
you're causing harm. So, do you know Dr. Stanley Goldfarb?
The name is familiar.
Phenomenal organization, do no harm.
Okay. Yes. Great.
Doctors who are coming together and saying, this is crazy. And for one thing, doctors have been penalized significantly by their organizations if they don't go along with this. So he is working and he is building together coalitions of doctors to say, this is not right. It is not acceptable. You'll notice independent doctors have much more ability, just like with COVID, to stand up against this medical mafia that's going on.
Because all of this, when you think about it, all of this is moving toward the top-down control. Now, because I've had an interest in the childhood vaccines and the issues around safety and efficacy of those for many, many years, I've seen, like when you were talking before about how the issue of whether of a supposedly or like a trans identifying child being used as a wedge issue in divorce cases, we've seen the same thing happen with vaccination, and it's very commonly used as a wedge issue where one parent, historically it's been the mother, and interestingly there was kind of a flip with that where the mother was the one who was kind of in many of these cases wanting the child to actually have the COVID shot. Historically, it's been the mother saying, I don't want my children vaccinated. And then it was the father saying, oh, I do. And there were many custody battles where the father was given either full custody of the children or he was given medical decision-making rights over the mother because of this dispute. Now, it didn't always line up in that way, but anyway, basically the parent who said, I think our children should be fully vaccinated according to the state-sponsored schedule, always won the legal argument, no matter what kind of medical studies, no matter how many expert witnesses were called to testify on behalf of the parent who did not want the vaccination. No, it was always the parent who wanted the children to be fully vaccinated who won the legal argument, and the custody battle and whatever else. So it's exactly that same issue. We're now seeing that same play used in this trans space.
And you have the medicalization. And first of all, these will be lifetime medical patients, which is why doctors are okay doing it. In this country, a month of puberty blockers is $7,000. So they very much want insurances to pay for this. They very much want parents to say, yep, we'll pony up for it. It is paying out big dividends to the people who are prescribing it. But when you talk about how things flip, I think it has to do with the level of information, because before with the vaccines, a mom might, be doing the research and finding things out and say, yeah, I'm seeing some discrepancies. And the father was probably a little bit less informed.
Yep.
You flip that. Yep. And now all of a sudden the propaganda is driven to creating that fear model. So the mom who does the research is only digesting the fear model of COVID, and that you're a bad parent if you don't do this. You will kill others' kids if you don't do this with your kid. And so I can see why that flipped, because they're the ones digesting all of that information. And it was such pure propaganda directed at making people afraid.
So this is a whole other thread to pull, isn't it? In that, so in the past, a mother who got curious about childhood vaccines could go on the internet and she could find all sorts of websites and papers and whatever that could.
You can't find it now.
Yeah, exactly. It's been hidden. So who hid it, and at whose behest? And with the Biden v. Missouri case,
isn't that fantastic?
Yeah. So we now see that the government is kind of reaching its big hand into big tech.
And that is one of those articles. That's one of those issues that you should keep in your back pocket. And when somebody says, "Well, the government would never do that," pull it out, say, look, and it applies to America, but I'm pretty sure it applied everywhere. That the government was pushing. You look at Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand. She was horrific.
We will be your single source of truth.
Right?
I mean, are you
Sorry.
kidding?
That is absolutely
right mind hears that and goes, yeah, fair enough.
right. And that was the fear had gotten so much to the level, and there are people who have not had to deal with stress, trauma, fear, and very much technical and medical. So it's over people's heads enough that they were like, okay, I'm just going to have somebody else handle that issue. Yeah, that's tough.
Huge. Yeah. Oh, wow. There's so many different directions I want to go in. Let me come back to the insurance thing. So you mentioned this insane cost of puberty blockers, $7,000 for just 1 month. And one thing that we spoke about it briefly during our previous conversation, and then a couple of one reader in particular asked about that whole insurance angle to it. And so I wondered if you had a chance to delve into this. Like, why are insurers prepared to fund this, given
because in some states they've been told that they have to fund these things. So it goes state by state. And there are some states who are now saying, okay, if you are going to choose to fund, and remember, they're making money off of charging higher premiums. They spread that cost out to everyone. This is not just just the person who's getting it pays it. It's if you have to do this, well, then they raise the cost of those premiums for everyone.
Everybody.
Just a little bit. So they're making money. Insurance companies are in business to make money. They are not in business to help people. But each state gets to set it up the way they want. Some states, Medicaid, which is the medical insurance for the very poor, covers it. State of Nebraska does not. There are some states who have now included with their bills have said, if an insurer in this state covers gender transitions, they also have to cover detransitions, because they don't cover detransition. And there's a very, very low level of people who understand how to help someone detransition.
Because this has never been done in human history. You're messing kids up in the first place, something that's never been done in human history. And now you have to figure out how to try to unmess them. All I can say is good luck.
I've talked with kids who believe, a young man who believed that he should be a woman, and his comment to me was so sad. He's like, if I don't like it when it's, when all the surgeries are done, I'll just go back. And I literally had to say, if you cut it off, you cannot put it back. And he was like, oh, and his mom was like, oh. But they're not hearing that kind of actual real speak about it. They're saying it's top surgery, it's bottom surgery, it's glorified all over the internet. The TikTok is, they've got so many things coming in at them. The overwhelming message is, this will make you feel better. This will fix you. It gives them hope. That hope is a placebo effect. So while they're, starting out, while they're socially affirming, everybody's loving on them and everything is wonderful. So of course it feels good.
There is an initial surge of euphoria, as I understand it, from the gonadotropin agonists, so the likes of Lupron, where for a short period of time, the levels of sex hormones are actually elevated, and so they do feel quite euphoric. And then of course the body adjusts to these high levels of hormones and drops production, and so they do go through this period of the high, and then there
are no studies showing. There's nothing showing.
In the past, we've understood that anything that gives you an initial high is likely to harm you, and this is why we protect children.
If there's an up, there's a down. That's life.
It's like law of nature, Newton's law of physics. And so this is why we've historically kept children away from mind-altering substances. We said, no, you can't drink alcohol. No, you can't smoke marijuana. No, you can't inject heroin, right? Because what goes up must come down. And yet again, people who should know better, it's hard for me to believe that they don't know better, have suddenly suspended all of those rules and said, well, if it makes you feel better initially, it must be good in the long term. When has that ever happened?
And the thing is, though, that's kind of been part of this progression. You've seen, the helicopter parenting, that don't ever let your children have anything bad happen to them. The reward, the trophy for not doing anything. Your team lost, but everybody gets a trophy because parents went too far and said, I don't ever want my kid to.
Self-esteem movement, which had
Exactly.
absolutely no idea, in fact, a completely backwards idea about how self-esteem is built. Self-esteem
It's not
is
given
built,
to you, it's
yeah,
earned.
yeah, self-esteem is built by performing esteemable
Right.
acts. It's that simple. It's not a matter of,
It's
well, if your
built by
parents say that,
struggle. And
yeah,
you cannot take the struggles away from a child and expect them to be able to survive. So we have stolen our children's resiliency. We have stolen their understanding that when you fall down, you pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and you start all over again. That's just the way it works. But we've interrupted that. And now we're saying, oh no, you feel a little awkward in your body. Maybe you're feeling a little unhappy. Let's immediately put you on medications.
yeah, and yeah, absolutely. The way that you feel is very rarely, if ever, a reliable guide to action. Because the way that you feel is going to shift from this moment to the next moment, and from today to the following day. And the way that you feel is going to be affected by all sorts of actions that you take.
And
So,
lots of bad ideas happen when you're feeling bad.
oh yes,
Lots
oh
of
yes,
them.
lots of very, very, very bad solutions come to mind.
And thank goodness, when we were kids, we had parents who said, knock that off.
Yeah,
It's going
exactly.
to be fine. Suck it up, cupcake.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
are going to go through this. Let
I
me
often,
tell you how bad it was when I was a kid.
oh,
But again,
exactly. I often
yeah,
joke to people, but it's a, well, I don't know, it's a joke with a serious groundwork, that my mother thought that she had fulfilled her role as a parent if she could take us out in public and we wouldn't embarrass her. And that's kind of like a horrifying thought to today's parents. Oh, you should be really fixated on the way that your child is feeling at any given moment. Yeah, I can look back to when I was a kid, and I had a lot of feelings, and my mother was sort of,
you
reasonably
remember the
disengaged.
look, and I will guarantee you that your mother's look would have been the same as my mother's look. If you
You bet.
in church, you step out of line in church and you get this. You're like, yep,
Or
oh dear. Yep, I will.
absolutely, absolutely, and the proper role of a father, um,
Yes.
was to, when you were giving your mum a bit of lip, was to kind of pull his newspaper down and look over it and say, "Don't you talk to your mother like that."
Yeah. And you're exactly right. So, and that's the other thing that's happened is we've demonized men in this country, and I think around the world, this nonsense about toxic masculinity, this making men in TV shows, the fop, the
Yeah,
sad
the
sack,
idiot, yeah, the loser, the one who could barely get out of bed in the morning if his
right,
if his sort of high-powered wife
right,
wasn't, organizing the kids and going off to be a neurosurgeon, and
right.
learning to fly small airplanes in her spare time. Yeah, exactly. I listened to a really, really interesting interview with a woman called, hang on, I've actually opened her Substack so that I can dig into this later on. Her name is Rachel Wilson, and she's got a Substack just called Rachel's Newsletter. And she's written a book that is called, sorry, one moment, let me just pull it up. It's called here it is, the Occult Origins of Feminism. Now, this is really, yeah, as I say, I've only listened to this one interview with her, so I need to dig into it further. But long story short, I mean, I've known for quite some time that the suffragette movements and the women's rights movements were very much backed by the usual suspects, the Rockefeller Foundation and the Carnegie Foundation. And of course, it's reasonably well known now that Gloria Steinem was actually a CIA asset. And so, but the more you pull on this thread, the more interesting it gets. And so, yeah, I suppose I'm not
I'm
a
gonna have
fan.
to read her article.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. So I'm not of that school of kind of feminine anti-feminist now who said, look, women should be back in the kitchen barefooted and pregnant. You pursued a career, you're a state representative. I pursued a career. I'm really happy with what I've done. But look, I do take the point that women now, by any measures which can be made, are more miserable than they've been at any previous time in history. And again, I mean, were there surveys about women's psychological well-being in the 19th century? Well, no, I don't think there were psychological surveys of anyone's.
It was just Sigmund Freud, and he was nuts. So
he was a bit kooky, wasn't he? More than a bit. But it's for all of the improvements that there've been in women's lot in life, why is it that women are still so gosh darn miserable?
Well, and now men are miserable too. I was just reading an article. I
Yeah.
was discussing this with one of my sons, my 22-year-old, about how men are dropping out of the dating pool because it's gotten so extreme. Women's standards are very much different. So yes, marriage has dropped to the lowest level ever in this country. And nobody's happy. And I think the point, yeah, we definitely should be voting. We definitely should be able to do, but the should have the choice to do what you want with your life and to use your skills and to find someone who matches and meshes with that choice. Is really, really important. This, for a long time, it's been that if you don't go to work and do things, and I stayed home with my kids while I did consulting on the side, because I was a little selfish. I didn't want anyone to get my baby's hugs and kisses and smiles. Those were mine. So it's
interesting, and I know you were using that word with some degree of irony, but like, where have we got to where it's considered odd for a woman to say, I want to raise my children? Yeah. Actually, I don't, I'm fine with them spending time with their grandparents. That's great. But I don't want their grandparents to be raising them. I sure as hell don't want a total stranger to be raising my child in a childcare center with
a childcare center that is funded by the government and that you don't know who it. There's a whole lot with that entire train of thought that just makes me go, ooh.
And here we go back, because every spoke in this wheel leads back toward a hub, and that hub is the state gets more and more and more control. So the state intervenes when parents can't agree on whether a child should be vaccinated or not, whether a child should be put through medical procedures or not. The state intervenes. The state intervenes when a woman gets pregnant and the father of the child is not present. He's racked off. She's not sure, who he is. Maybe he's in prison. Who the hell knows? The state intervenes and becomes the surrogate father for that child through welfare. The state intervenes to raise the child in a childcare center, in a school.
And every single one of those decisions was pushed forth and supported by the notion that it is the kind thing to do. Yes. It is the weaponized compassion again. You should want these kids to be able to go to daycare so the mom can work or the mom and dad can work, because we're now a two-income family. So you should. And how could you not want to support these working parents? And it's how it's presented as, this is the kindest option. This is the best option. It's the most wholesome option.
And that in particular is, that's a great way of selling it to women. Right, because that's kind of women's weak spot. Oh,
do you know how it's being sold to men? Is you'll get more women working in our worker shortage. So we now have businesses that are saying, of course we'll pay for an abortion for you. Of course we will help you get to a state where it's legal at whatever stage you're at. We'll pay for your trip to go there if your state doesn't, allow them when you actually choose to kill your baby. But you know why? Because it costs so much more money to have a pregnant employee who will then take time off of work and may or may not come back.
Yes. And in the meantime, you've got to bring someone else in and train them. And then that person is not certain whether their position is just to cover maternity leave or whether it be permanent. Yeah. So it's always the usual suspects, isn't it? And in particular, I mean, what this particular woman, this Rachel Wilson, pointed out, I had heard this before, is that there was so the Federal Reserve Act and the Income Tax Act were introduced in the same year, 1913, and then the suffragette movements were very heavily pushed because, of course, now you've got an Income Tax Act, but women are staying at home raising their babies, so you've lost half of your taxable, potential workforce.
We
So
also had wars.
Yeah.
And the wars fed into if you send the men away to fight, who is in the factories?
It's the women. And then when the men come back from war and the women say, oh, we still want these jobs, like we had some independence. Yeah. Okay.
Ooh. There's a lot of overlapping factors, and it's one of those things you go really deep down that we need to look at how things are right now and say, is it truly the best thing for us and for our kids? Yes. Or is it something that someone else is pushing me to want? And so we've got to learn how to trust our gut. You and I did during COVID. We're like, I'm sorry.
Yeah. This smells funny. Yeah. And that was my initial reaction. Like from the get-go, I was like, this smells funny. Something about this isn't right. And I wasn't sure exactly. I mean, I had again, it's follow the money, right? So I had a sense that there was some financial interest at stake here. It took me quite a while of pulling threads to sort of figure out, well, who does benefit? Cui bono, who benefits? And I still can't say that I know who the they is, the they, them, those, but it's clearly the moneyed interests, right?
And you can see the public actors, the president of Pfizer, who, Borla, who is now a $30 billion person. All of the billionaires who all of a sudden popped up who are in the pharmaceutical industry because of this, and this revolving door between the pharmaceutical companies and our FDA and CDC and our agencies.
Oh, in your face, isn't it? Scott Gottlieb, he's at FDA, he's at Pfizer. Where are you now? Yeah.
So that's why people have to be able to decide for themselves, and they have to listen to that voice that says, if you hear yourself questioning something that's being pushed, dig deeper. Look at places. Don't just Google it. Look at different places.
Yeah.
Look through Substacks and look through everywhere you can find to get opposing viewpoints.
I think one of the biggest gifts for me of the whole scamdemic era, and this is off the back of me already considering myself a pretty skeptical, alternative leaning person. Just to give you an example, okay, I had home births with both my children. They were exclusively breastfed until they self-weaned. Neither of my kids were vaccinated. My kids never even had a kitty. Well, we call it Panadol. I think you call it acetaminophen. Like my kids were just raised completely drug-free. So I already consider myself like pretty, not a conventional person. One of the gifts of the scamdemic has been there are all sorts of things that I formerly took for granted that I now look at and say, do I really, is my position on this really well-founded, or do I need to look at different points of view on this?
The assumption.
Again, I was fully on board with feminism. And when I looked at the lives of my mother and my grandmother, I thought, well, I've got a much better deal. And in some ways I do. I'm also extraordinarily fortunate that my husband is one of these guys who he likes women who think for themselves and have careers, but he was also really paternal, right? And really supportive of me taking the lead, as mothers have to with very young children, because we are biologically equipped to care for young children. That's a fact. That's
the other thing. Have you seen that nonsense? Chest feeding, the nonsense chest feeding.
This is like a whole other thread, and I know I have to let you.
I just said that's a squirrel. I just got distracted by that.
This is a thread that we need to pull on, because it is so crazy. And in Australia, so when I was still pregnant, I joined the Australian Breastfeeding Association, which is this marvelous organization that supports women to nurture their babies and provides breastfeeding advice to women. And they're just the most wonderful organization. until they went crazy. And they actually threw out one of their volunteer counselors. So they're like women who've benefited from the ABA and they want to give back. And so they volunteer their services, and they're like available at 2 a.m. if a woman's having trouble with feeding and she's out of her mind. She can ring up an ABA counselor and get some advice. They're wonderful, wonderful women. But this woman said that, men cannot breastfeed, and for that, the organization basically slapped her down and threw her out. Like,
that's terrible.
Are you people out of your minds? And I was really upset that this fantastic organization that has been supporting women, adult human females, women, okay? They've been supporting women for all these years, and then they went crazy. So yeah,
and that's how it feels when you are betrayed by groups that say they are women supporting. If anybody can be a woman, then nobody is a woman.
Exactly. And that's, so back to the weaponized compassion thing. It is not compassionate to anyone. It is not compassionate to a male who is struggling with his sense of who he is in this world, which, as you quite rightly pointed out, the sense of who men are in the world has been systematically attacked and undermined by the usual suspects for over a generation now, for really 2 or 3 generations. And so men don't know who they are in the world. It's not kind to such a male who has lost his way to say, here's the solution. You could be a woman instead. Not kind. It is not kind to women to kind of force them to accept men in their spaces, competing in their sports, changing in their locker rooms, working, for God's sake. This is an example from the UK. Working in rape crisis centers, right?
Or going to domestic violence shelters.
Yep. None of this is common. It is crazy. So, okay, my last thing before I let you go, okay, I found this quote. It's just so brilliant. I wanted to run it by you. By Theodore Dalrymple. Political correctness is communist propaganda writ small. In my study of communist societies, I came to the conclusion that the purpose of communist propaganda was not to persuade or convince, nor to inform, but to humiliate. And therefore, the less it corresponded to reality, the better. When people are forced to remain silent, when they are being told the most obvious lies, or even worse, when they are forced to repeat the lies themselves, they lose once and for all their sense of probity. To assent to obvious lies is to cooperate with evil, and in some small way to become evil oneself. One standing to resist anything is thus eroded and even destroyed. A society of emasculated liars is easy to control. I think if you examine political correctness, it has the same effect and is intended to.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. And that's just it. And that's why, while I have empathy and sympathy for people who are dealing with gender dysphoria, I'm not,
whatever that thing is.
Right. I'm not going to call a man a woman because it makes him feel better, because it makes me feel bad. And my first priority is to make sure that I am okay. It's not to take care of other people. It's to make sure I'm okay. It's the airplane model.
I was going to say it's the oxygen mask advice. Yep.
And that is extremely good advice. So, that's one of, so I have to run for election again next year. Because I'm just, my election last year was just for the 2 years remainder of the term of the senator who unexpectedly passed away. And so as I run next year, it's possible that there is a man who is going to be moving back from Los Angeles to the Millard area where he grew up. He now believes he's a woman. And he came to every one of my hearings and all of the debates, leading protests, and he's moving back to Millard to save Millard from me. Like, I welcome the competition, absolutely, but I will never address him. His name is Jesse. Fine, I'll call you by your name, but I'm not going to address you as a woman. You're a man. Yes. And that's and I will have to make the case, and it's going to be, the media will slaughter me about that, because how dare you not affirm and support? No, he is a man.
Yeah, your duty to yourself, to your
truth. My duty to truth
Yes,
is
is to speak
tell
the
it.
truth. This man is a man, and he can dress in women's clothing, and he can take opposite sex hormones, and he can have his
Doesn't matter what you cut off, inject, or insert.
Yes.
You're still a man.
Yeah. And if we allow this force, this destructive force to steal truth from us, then we're gone. So look, more power to you. Is there any way that listeners can support you? Do you?
I will. Well, I want to tell you one thing first before. So our governor. So do you know who Riley Gaines is?
Yes, I do. An amazing, brave, tough woman. Yeah.
If you ever want to do an interview with her, let me know, because she came to Nebraska, did a huge event. We had more than 1,200 people there. I introduced Dr. Greg Brown, who is a physiologist here, and he's a professor at one of our universities. He's been the expert testifier in lots of these cases, saying that, boys are different than girls. I mean, it's not rocket science.
I know, right? We all knew this until a short time ago. Yeah.
Well, she challenged our governor, who was there. He was also at the event, and he spoke a little bit to the governor of Oklahoma, which is a state to our south and our west. Instituted a Women's Bill of Rights. So Riley works for a group called Independent Women's Forum, and they've come up with a Women's Bill of Rights. And so the governor of Oklahoma did an executive order. Our governor, Jim Pillen, did an executive order 2 days after Riley was here, basically saying, huge blanket Women's Bill of Rights. They can't go to domestic violence shelters if they're not a woman. Protecting. And so I sent it there for you to look at it. So once my sports and spaces bill goes into effect, it will supersede this executive order, because executive orders are only good for as long as that governor is there. Then they can be
they can be revoked by the next person.
Right.
All right, that's great. I'll put that in the show notes.
Yeah, we need to make it law. But I'm so pleased to have a governor who's willing to stand up for this sort of nonsense and push back against this. But it was fascinating having Riley here and talking and getting this push. So
I would so love to talk to her, because as mentioned, we are having this insanity pushed in Australia, and there are certain areas where it's being pushed more heavily, but this is like a cancer. It's just metastasizing everywhere. And
it's the cool thing. It's the thing that, again, with the propaganda and the media, the media is feeding it, and the media is sponsored by Pfizer and all of the
yeah, we've seen those compilations brought to you by Pfizer. Yeah.
That's, we just have to keep pushing back, and we have to have people not afraid to stand up and say, this is wrong, and be okay with people being angry at them. I mean, the abuse I took last year was pretty intense. What do I care? I mean, my husband loves me, my parents love me, my kids love me. That's really all I need.
Yes. And you will, when you're lying there on your deathbed, hopefully many, many years hence, you can have that satisfaction of knowing I spoke up for truth. I spoke up for children. The people who attacked me, well, it's not for you to try to figure out, where they're coming from and what their motives are. Like they have that examination of their own conscience to do for themselves, but you are called upon to do what is right after you've examined your own conscience. So I would dearly love to talk to you for about 16 hours, but I know.
We have fun.
So, all right. So I will share. I can see you've popped a couple of links in the chat. I'll share them in the show notes. I would really love people to follow you, support you in any way that they can. More power to you as you run for re-election, and we shall hopefully talk again soon, and I can work my way through the rest of my incredibly extensive list of questions, because there was a big one we didn't get to, and that was transgenderism in the military. So that's part 3, transgenderism in the military, right? I've already got my subject.
There we go.
Okay, let's talk again soon. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Robin. Bye.
Bye.